twin suns of Vorlax 9 hovered over the jagged skyline like two blazing eyes, casting sharp gold light across the burnt orange sands. The heat was constant, dry but tinged with an electric tension that made the skin prickle. Even before the transport pod touched down, Alex Morgan felt the charged particles flicker against her exposed arms. She blinked slowly, unbothered, while the other cadets inside the cabin were already strapping on cooling vests and fumbling for their helmets. "Put that on before your sweat boils," hissed a purple-scaled Drevik student beside her. His voice filtered through his throat vents. He shoved a chrome mask toward her. She shook her head once, calm and unreadable, before tightening the cotton wraps around her wrists instead. "I'll be fine," she said, her voice flat but not defiant. Just a statement. She had survived worse in the Mojave and Death Valley, in isolated biomes where she had learned to read the land like a map etched in instinct. This was no different. Only the gravity pressed a little harder here. The hatch unsealed with a hiss, and a blast of furnace-hot air punched into the cabin. The others winced and rushed out, their insulated boots crunching over the sun-baked sand. Alex followed, deliberately slower, letting the dry wind whip through her dark hair. She squinted toward the hills, shimmering in the distance, knowing somewhere out there, beneath cracked obsidian ridges, the plasma lizards moved. The lizards were legendary, creatures of fire and fury, supposedly born during solar flares in the planet's volcanic infancy. She had seen holograms, read the reports, heard stories of armor melted through in seconds and containment drones reduced to molten slag. Every record concluded the same way. They could not be tamed. No one had ever touched one and lived. No one had ever fed one without losing a hand or a life. The command outpost loomed ahead, a geometric dome of reflective glass and steel, half buried in the sand for insulation. Inside, instructors waited, alien biologists, veteran survivalists, and behavioral scientists from half the galaxy. The cadets filed in and stood at attention while the lead officer, a six-eyed reptilian female named Instructor Vorlax, began her briefing. "The Vorlaxian terrain will test every assumption you have about sentient fauna," she said, pacing before a massive projection of the lizard skeletal structure. "The plasma lizards emit electromagnetic bursts that disable equipment and incinerate nervous systems on contact. Do not attempt interaction without authorization. You will be assigned remote observation tasks only." Murmurs buzzed through the room. Most nodded solemnly. Others smirked in overconfidence. Alex said nothing. She watched the moving hologram of the creature's gait, the twitching tail, the flick of the tongue, the way it dragged its forelimbs before lunging. She leaned slightly forward, absorbing every detail. After the briefing, teams were dispatched to observation zones. Each cadet had a partner. Each was fitted with a tracker, a comlink, and two fail-safe capsules, one to trigger drone extraction, the other a fast-acting nerve agent in case of fatal injury. Only Alex refused both. "You refuse safety protocols?" a stunned technician asked. "I trust my methods," she replied. "If I need extraction, I'll walk back." The technician stared at her in disbelief before silently stamping her clearance. She left the outpost with only a canvas pack, a cloth canteen, and a satchel of Earth-made dried meat. Her boots were worn but trusted, the same ones she had used while crossing sulfur pits in Patagonia. The other cadets watched her leave in silence, half expecting to see smoke rise from the desert, where she would inevitably perish. Alex walked alone across the plains. The heat shimmered around her like a curtain of invisible flames, and the black stones embedded in the sand radiated warmth that made the air bend. She paused often, not because she was tired, but to listen. The lizards didn't roar or hiss. They clicked, low, almost imperceptible clicks, like hot metal cooling in water. She followed those clicks. Midday came and passed. Shadows shortened, then stretched. Still she walked. Her lips were cracked, and her forehead glistened with sweat, but her breath remained steady. When she finally saw the telltale shimmer on the ridge, a wave of heat that moved with sentience, she crouched. There it was, her first sighting. The lizard was smaller than expected, perhaps a juvenile. It had scales that glowed faintly with blue pulses like slow lightning under its skin. It dragged its belly against the stones, pausing to flick its tongue at the air. Every so often a faint sizzle sparked between its claws and the rock. Alex did not move. She watched. She waited. Then, with the most delicate of motions, she unwrapped the satchel at her side and pulled out a strip of dried meat. She held it out in her open palm, letting the scent drift into the wind. The lizard froze. Its eyes, milky white, no visible pupils, locked onto her hand. The air buzzed with energy. One wrong move and she knew her fingers would vanish in flame, she whispered softly. Not words, just sounds, rhythmic, familiar, like heartbeat. She shifted her posture, low, still, non-threatening. The lizard inched forward, its head tilted slightly. It clicked. Louder now. Then again. Each step closer sparked a faint discharge of static from its feet. When it came within a meter, Alex lowered her hand gently to the ground and let the meat rest on a flat rock. The lizard approached, paused, then lunged, grabbing the food in a single fluid snap. It did not run. It stood there, chewing. Sparks flew from its jaw, and then, impossibly, it sat. Alex did not move for another 10 minutes. When she finally rose, slow and smooth, the lizard made no motion to attack or flee. It followed her with its eyes. Then, it turned and disappeared behind the rocks. She exhaled slowly and began walking back to the outpost. Not triumphant, not excited. Focused. A new plan already forming in her mind. This was not the end of the trial. It was the beginning of something that no species in the galaxy had dared to imagine. Behind her, unseen in the distance, a second lizard, larger, older, watched her from the shade of a crevice, its skin crackling with interest. Alex stepped back into the command dome just before sundown, the scent of scorched rock and dry wind clinging to her skin. A thin layer of dust coated her boots, and her lips were cracked, but her movements were deliberate and calm. The room fell silent as she passed through the central hallway, where cadets were reviewing thermal drone footage and comparing lizard encounter data. No one had expected her to return, at least not walking. Instructor Vorlax glanced up from her data pad, her 6 eyes narrowing. "Report!" she barked. Alex said nothing at first. She walked up to the central console, pulled a data chip from her belt pouch, and slotted it into the terminal. Footage began playing on the primary screen, raw, unedited, with no enhancements. It showed a lizard, scales glowing blue, approaching her outstretched hand, then feeding calmly from a flat rock. Murmurs filled the dome instantly. A Drevik male spat out his drink. A Surlian cadet turned to his teammate, eyes wide. One of the senior technicians rewound the footage 3 times, zooming in, trying to detect wires, pheromone trails, or tranquilizer darts. There were none. No tech. No tricks. Instructor Vorlax's voice cut through the noise. "Explain how you survived." Alex kept her gaze steady. "I studied the lizard's movement pattern. It was young, less volatile. I approached passively, used food as a bridge. It responded with curiosity, not aggression." "You touched nothing," Vorlax snapped. "No drones, no sedatives, not even a pulse shield?" "Nothing," Alex confirmed. "I relied on behavior cues, submissive posture, nonverbal sounds. I read its body language like I would a desert coyote." Vorlax hissed sharply, her long tongue flicking between sharp teeth. She hated Earth metaphors. "You were warned against direct contact. That was not an authorized procedure." "I didn't make contact," Alex replied. "It came to me." A long silence followed. Then, unexpectedly, Vorlax dismissed her with a sharp wave of her clawed hand. "You will submit a full behavioral analysis by sunrise. No speculation. Only observation." Alex nodded once and left the dome's main floor. The cadets parted as she passed, but the air between them was thick with disbelief, envy, and curiosity. A few whispered. One laughed too loudly to cover his discomfort. She paid no attention. She had work to do. That night, while others slept or calibrated drones for the next day's scans, Alex sat cross-legged at her console. She rewound every second of her interaction with the creature, noting the twitch of its tail, the arc of its neck, the way its pupils, barely visible behind the opaque lens, dilated before it struck the meat. She documented posture, movement rhythm, and distance tolerance. Her report was clinical, no flourish, just hard data. By dawn, her eyes were bloodshot, but her report was submitted. She stepped out of the dome before the morning horn sounded and headed back into the field. Without announcement, without permission. No one stopped her. Far to the south, in the Canyon of Flares, a Surlian team prepared their third containment attempt. The Surlian lead, Commander Cross, towered over his team with his signature black exosuit and thermal claws. His team had brought an electromagnetic net powered by ion batteries. It had taken 2 weeks to assemble. Drones hovered above their heads, capturing every angle. If the trap worked, the footage would be presented at the Galactic Symposium. If it failed, well, it wouldn't. Cross had never failed. Alex arrived at the observation ridge just as the team engaged the lures. She crouched silently behind a cluster of volcanic glass and watched. The bait was synthetic, a mix of blood scents and electrical pulses. It buzzed softly in the sand. The lizard arrived in under 3 minutes. This one was larger than the one she had encountered. Its back was scarred with burns, and plasma flickered visibly along its spine. It sniffed the air once, then froze. Its tongue shot out, then curled tightly in. The net sprang with a booming crack. Ion threads wrapped around the lizard's torso, lighting up with a grid of pulsing blue light. The creature shrieked, a sound that rattled the rocks. It flared once, twice, and exploded in a wave of blinding white energy. The net melted instantly. One of the drones plummeted from the sky, sparking violently. The lizard dashed off, but its tail caught a cadet's leg and seared the armor into his skin. Cross cursed, ordered a retreat, and smashed his comlink on the ground. The operation had failed. Again, as his team pulled back, Alex remained where she was, unmoving. She pulled a small notepad from her belt and wrote one line. Netting triggers thermal discharge. Plasma reacts to artificial restraint as threat. She closed the pad and slipped away, unseen. Back at the dome, rumors spread fast. Alex was summoned to the debrief chamber by noon. This time, Vorlax was joined by 2 visiting council observers, one from the Sithral system and another from Human Colonization Bureau. Your report contained useful insight, said the human observer, a bald man with pale skin and an expression like glass. But your continued excursions without authorization are problematic. Alex stood without fidgeting. With respect, sir, these creatures are not responding to technology. They're responding to behavior. Your protocols assume domination. I'm using adaptation. You're not here to debate philosophy, the Sithral observer said sharply. His mandibles twitched in irritation. You're here to generate results without violating the Academy's risk thresholds. Alex held her ground. Then adjust the thresholds? The old methods are failing. The lizard didn't react violently to me. It fed. It stayed near. We've been treating them as monsters. What if they're just intelligent animals protecting their territory? Vorlax narrowed her eyes. You believe you can control them? No, Alex replied. But I believe I can understand them. There was silence. The human observer leaned back, folding his hands. We'll grant you provisional access to the southern ridge, but if you provoke an incident, you'll be removed from the program and off this planet by sundown. Understood? Alex nodded. Understood. That evening, as the second sun dipped below the scorched horizon, Alex stood once again on the open sand, alone. This time, she carried a small thermal blanket, her meat satchel, and a single water vial. She sat cross-legged in the same place where the first lizard had appeared, and waited. Hours passed. The sky darkened to deep violet. Then, from the rocks, a shimmer. The same juvenile emerged, slower this time, cautious but not afraid. Behind it, 2 smaller shapes slithered forward. Siblings, perhaps. Alex smiled faintly. She unwrapped the meat, broke it into 3 pieces, and placed them evenly spaced in front of her. The lizards came forward, crackling softly in the still air. One by one they took the food and settled around her, eyes half closed. No weapons, no tools, no fear. In the distance, 2 thermal drones recorded everything. Silent witnesses to a new chapter in the galaxy's understanding of a species no one thought could be reached. The third day on Vorlax 9 broke with a coldness that didn't belong on such a scorched planet. The air was still, unnaturally so, and Alex felt the weight of something shifting beneath the surface of routine. She had returned to the outpost before sunrise, her clothes layered with sand dust, her satchel emptied of food, her voice quiet. She said nothing to the guards stationed outside the dome and walked straight to the decontamination bay without speaking a word. Inside, she was met not with silence but applause. A cluster of cadets stood clapping near the main console, mockingly enthusiastic, smirking as if welcoming a circus act. One of the larger males, a Branthorian with metallic skin and a slow grin, stepped forward. "Did your pets ask for a bedtime story last night?" he drawled, his tones soaked in sarcasm. Alex didn't answer. She walked past him, her face unreadable, her boots leaving faint prints across the polished floor. She knew the footage from the drones had already reached the council room. She could feel the shift in energy, unease, resentment, and something worse, humiliation. Her success had made her a mirror, one that reflected the failure of those who relied solely on engineered dominance. In the upper chamber, Instructor Vorlax awaited her, flanked by 2 guards from the planetary patrol. This time the atmosphere was clipped, colder than usual. "You left containment range without checking in," Vorlax said sharply, tapping her claw against the security log. "This breaches Article 17 of the Off-World Protocols." "I left with express permission," Alex replied. "Observer Brandt and Counselor Dylan both cleared my route," Vorlax hissed through clenched fangs. "They did not authorize additional lizard contact. They didn't prohibit it either," Alex answered evenly. "I acted in accordance with the assigned boundary, nothing more." Vorlax turned her gaze toward the wall, where a paused screen showed 3 plasma lizards encircling Alex in the dusk. The playback shimmered in bluish hues, crackling slightly from the electromagnetic bleed caught by the drone sensors. None of the lizards had shown signs of aggression. One even rested its head briefly on Alex's knee. "Explain the change in behavior," Vorlax ordered. Alex met her gaze. "I believe plasma lizards operate on recognition of trust-based motion patterns. They don't react to weapons because weapons never hesitate. I hesitate. I wait. I present no threat, so I'm not treated as one. You speak of beasts as though they are philosophers. I speak of them as I experience them. Caution does not equal savagery." The room remained silent for several seconds. Then Vorlax leaned forward, her tone low and precise. "You have one chance to prove this is not an anomaly. You will take a team, 1 biologist, 1 drone tech, and 1 cadet observer. You will lead a controlled observation in Sector 9. You will not act alone." Alex gave a nod, knowing full well what this meant. The council wanted to see if her methods worked in the presence of others, or if her presence alone was the magic thread. She left the chamber without delay, her thoughts already calculating. At noon, the team assembled at the launch bay. Her assigned companions arrived late, unenthusiastic, and visibly dismissive. The biologist, a pale-skinned man named Dr. Hilron, carried a scanner and a portable DNA sequencer. He refused eye contact. The drone technician, a thin, sorrel woman named Kriya, grunted a half-greeting and pulled a hover crate behind her. The cadet was a young Earth recruit named Jensen, eager but clearly tense. He had seen the footage. He didn't believe it. They boarded the sand rover in silence and drove across the glass plains, toward a section of the planet known for deep cracks and energy bursts. Alex requested no commentary during the ride. She needed clarity. She needed the team to see, not theorize, not measure, but witness. The rover halted just beyond a canyon wall that shimmered with residual plasma scars. She stepped out, the others hesitating behind her. She walked to a flat rock shelf, dropped to her knees, and unpacked a simple cloth bundle. Inside were 2 fresh strips of meat and a small leather pouch of her own design, filled with water infused with dried insect oils. Her own method for adding familiar organic scent to a foreign offering. The canyon was silent. Minutes passed. Then the crackle came. Blue light, faint but definite, shimmered at the far edge of the shelf. The lizard was larger this time. It moved differently. Slower, heavier, more deliberate. Sparks rippled along its spine with every step. It climbed toward her, stopped 6 feet away, and tilted its head. She laid the food on the stone, one piece at a time. The lizard advanced. It sniffed, then grabbed the meat and swallowed without hesitation. Behind her, Kriya cursed softly under her breath. Hilron leaned forward, pointing his scanner with shaking hands. "Are you seeing this?" he whispered. Alex remained still. "It knows you're here. Be silent." The lizard turned its head toward the team. Sparks pulsed brighter. Kriya's drone beeped. The lizard's tail surged, slamming into the rock hard enough to send a vibration through the ground. Sparks flared like fireworks. The lizard hissed once, then turned away and vanished into a crevice below. The moment passed. Everyone stood in stunned silence. Hilron cleared his throat. It fed in front of us." "Yes," Alex said quietly. "It did." Jensen looked around, visibly shaken. "It reacted to the drone. It reacts to intrusion. Technology hums. Breath doesn't." Kriya packed up her crate in silence. No further commentary was needed. By the time the team returned to base, the footage had already been transmitted. Word spread fast. For the first time in decades, the plasma lizard's behavior had shifted in a repeatable pattern. More than that, it had acknowledged a group. Tamed would be too strong a word, but it was no longer just a myth. In the following days, 3 new protocols were issued by the Academy: Organic Entry Protocol, Trust-Based Interaction Directive, and Morgan Method, Class 1. Alex's name was now in the official registry. She said nothing when she saw it. She didn't smile. She didn't blink. That night, she returned to the same ridge, alone. She didn't carry food. She didn't carry gear. She simply sat. When the lizard returned, same one, blue-scaled, larger, she extended her hand slowly. It stepped forward, lowered its body, and rested its snout against her palm. No sparks, no fire, just heat and breath, something ancient and alive, finally understood. By the time the council chambers summoned her again, Alex already knew the reason. The footage from the group observation had caused a ripple beyond the boundaries of the research dome. For the first time since the Vorlax program began, the Galactic Behavioral Council had taken direct notice. Not just the scientists, not just the military, the core delegates. She entered the chamber at midday, the suns piercing through the high crystal panels above, casting shifting geometries of light across the long obsidian table. The council sat in elevated chairs, each adorned with the insignia of their planetary origin. At the center sat Chancellor Yorl, a slow-speaking elder of the Ascidian race, whose translucent skin glowed faintly with internal phosphorescence. He was old, older than most living council members, and rarely left the core systems. His presence on Vorlax 9 meant decisions were coming. "You will speak truthfully," he said without preamble, his voice a soft vibration in the stone floor. No exaggeration, no omission. Alex stood in the center of the chamber, hands relaxed at her sides, gaze steady. "Yes, Chancellor. You claim to have established a pattern of interaction with one of the plasma lizards." "I do not claim," she said. "I recorded." Yorl blinked slowly, his vertical pupils contracting. "And you believe this pattern is scalable?" "I believe it is adaptable." There was a long pause. Another council member, a skeletal female from the Drenai system with red-plated bones visible beneath stretched skin, leaned forward. "You've created risk by violating standard protocol. Your proximity endangered your own life and the lives of those around you." Alex nodded once. "Yes, but so did every previous approach. Mine offered a different result." The Drenai female made a low clicking sound with her tongue and leaned back without further comment. Yorl turned slightly to his aide. The aide handed him a small device. He pressed a button, and a still image appeared mid-air. Alex kneeling before the lizard, hand extended, while the creature rested its jaw on her palm. "This is what no species has achieved in 200 years of contact with Vorlax fauna," Yorl said. "And it was done with no armor, no control tech, no baiting field, no force," Alex added softly. Yorel studied her. "You speak of sentience. I speak of recognition," the council murmured. A term like that changed everything. Recognition meant possibility. It meant intelligence. And if these lizards were not just reactive, but responsive, then the implications were vast. "We will approve one final test," Yorel declared. "A full encounter under open conditions. You will not be accompanied. But you will be monitored by 2 independent observers from neutral systems. If this final encounter results in confirmation of behavioral bonding, your method will be considered for core adoption. Alex's chest rose with a single breath. Understood. You will begin tomorrow at dawn. That night, she sat outside the dome, not in her usual crouch or silent meditation, but cross-legged near a dying fire, sharpening a stick with a small bone-handled knife. She didn't plan to use the stick. She didn't plan to use anything, but it helped to focus her thoughts. The ridge had changed since the last visit. There were new tracks in the sand. She knew the lizards were nearby, watching. The next morning, as the dual suns crested over the volcanic teeth in the east, Alex made her way to Sector 11, the most volatile section of the eastern plains. 2 thermal drones followed at a distance. Each was controlled by an observer stationed in orbit, one from the Helix Core, one from the Phelan Protectorate. Both had been briefed not to intervene unless fatality was imminent. She carried no weapons, no food, no water. Her hands were empty, her body unguarded. She wore nothing but loose cloth, wrapped tightly around her limbs to protect from the sun. Her only tool was a small disc embedded under her skin, a biometric trigger that would alert med teams in case her vitals dropped to 0. She doubted she'd need it. By midday, the air shimmered like liquid metal, and Alex reached the crest of the obsidian outcrop known as Black Needle. From this point, the sand fell away into a crater of jagged stone and cracked ground, where energy bursts leapt from the surface every few minutes in faint flashes. She sat down in the open, legs folded, palms resting on her knees. She said nothing. She moved nothing. The wind burned against her cheeks. She waited. The first click came after 37 minutes. Soft, tentative. Then another, deeper, closer. She did not look up. Her breathing remained slow, her heartbeat steady. Then the shimmer appeared. Not 1, but 3 lizards crested the ridge opposite her. The one in the center was the familiar blue-scaled juvenile. The others were larger, older, judging by the length of their tails and the intensity of the glow along their necks. They did not approach immediately. They stood watching. Alex slowly raised one hand, palm open and upward. The blue lizard took a step, then another, then a pause. The others followed. The crackle of plasma surrounded her now, faint but constant, like standing in the static edge of a storm cloud. Her skin tingled. Her hair lifted slightly from her scalp. But she did not flinch. The blue lizard stopped less than a meter away. It sniffed the air. Its eyes narrowed. Then, carefully, it stepped forward and touched its snout to her hand. She gently moved her fingers along its scaled jaw. A low vibration hummed beneath her fingertips, not unpleasant, like a warm engine idling. She did not pull back. The other lizard stepped forward. One rubbed against her shoulder and settled behind her, its tail curling protectively around her back. The blue lizard lay across her lap. Above, the drones recorded everything. No aggression, no sparks, no violence, just presence. A living circle. Alex closed her eyes for a moment. She was no longer a visitor on Vorlax 9. She had become part of the terrain, part of its truth. The silence that followed was no longer filled with doubt. It had changed, become a different kind of silence. The kind that surrounds understanding, not disbelief. For the next hour, Alex remained seated among the 3 lizards in the scorched basin of Sector 11. The juvenile kept its position across her lap, still and unthreatened. The older one rested behind her, tail stretched out lazily in a broad arc. The third, largest of the trio, circled once before settling on the rock above her, watching like a sentinel. High above, the 2 orbital drones floated quietly, scanning every movement, capturing every detail of the encounter. The observers, one from Helix Core and one from Phelan Protectorate, had sent no messages, issued no warnings, triggered no protocols. They simply watched. The data would be transmitted to Council systems in real time. There was nothing more to prove. Alex slowly lifted her right hand again. The blue juvenile shifted slightly, its eyes blinking once as her palm passed near its jaw. She didn't touch it this time. Instead, she extended her hand toward the large lizard seated on the rock. The elder creature did not move. Its neck pulsed with inner light. Its heat signature read like molten stone. After a moment, it blinked once, a single, slow movement of its lidless eye. Then it rose, took one careful step down from the rock, and approached her side. She remained still, spine straight, breath slow. The lizard lowered its head. Its snout brushed against her shoulder, not a tap, not a strike, but something slower, something close to acknowledgement. She had been accepted, not as a handler, not as a trainer, as something else, as a presence, a being with no threat, no demands. It was the Phelan observer who finally broke radio silence. His voice crackled faintly in her earpiece. "Alex Morgan," he said, "return to base." She didn't answer right away. She knew what came next. The council would declare the method viable. She would be assigned to formalize it. The creatures would be studied under new regulations. Protocols would be rewritten. The Morgan method would no longer be an experiment. It would become curriculum. The moment dissolved when the juvenile lizard rose from her lap. It stretched once, flicked its tongue toward the wind, then clicked its jaw 3 times, a soft, rapid rhythm. The others responded in kind. The larger 2 stood slowly, then turned. Without hesitation, all 3 walked in single file toward the northern edge of the basin, moving with grace over the black stones, disappearing into the shimmering heat. Alex stood up only when the last flick of a tail vanished from view. When she returned to the outposts, the doors opened before she could reach them. Dr. Hilron stood waiting, his scanner still clutched in one hand, lips parted as if in search of a word. He found none. He simply nodded once and stepped aside as she passed. Inside the central command hall, the projection dome had already begun cycling through her footage. Word had arrived from the Galactic Behavioral Council. The official declaration was clear. Subject, Homo sapiens. Test subject, Vorlax fauna, Class 7, hazard, plasma, lizard. Conclusion, trust-linked recognition behavior observed. Recommendation, immediate preservation protocols. Prohibition of military capture attempts. Classification, semi-sentient. She had changed the Council's stance in a single cycle, but the implications went deeper than policy. Over the following days, her time was no longer her own. Teams arrived from 5 systems. The Helix Biostudies unit brought psychologists to interview her. The Obsidian delegation demanded she attend an ethics summit. Press representatives from the Terran Broadcast Federation tried to film her in the mess hall. She denied them all. She spent her evenings in silence, writing with an actual pen on recycled paper, not on a screen. Her field notes became chapters. Her sketches of movement paths and heat bursts became patterns. The program wanted her to codify the interaction. She refused to distill it to formulas. On the 8th day, she submitted a single-page summary. Title: Recognition without ownership. The case against control. Closing line. What bends does not always belong to the hand that bends it. That document was archived under restricted access immediately. Only senior council members could read it in full. She was not surprised. When the council offered her an honorary position in the Intergalactic Faunal Ethics Consortium, she declined. She didn't want to attend forums. She didn't want to speak on panels. She wanted only one thing: to return to Vorlax 9's eastern ridge. Chancellor Yorl sent a personal transmission, requesting clarification. She replied with one sentence: "Understanding does not require audience." The council relented. She was granted permanent clearance for open field observation on Vorlax 9, unaccompanied, unrestricted. The first human to receive such access on any Class 7 hazard planet. By the time the research base packed up to rotate personnel and cycle out equipment, Alex was no longer part of it. She had already moved her shelter to a flat rock plateau north of the Needle. She lived without a tent. Her fire pit was shallow and precise. Her water collection unit ran on a handmade filtration stone, the blueprint of which she never shared. She left no digital log. Once every few days, the lizards returned. Sometimes only the juvenile, sometimes the full trio. Once, a 4th came. Larger, even older. It kept its distance. Then it watched, and that was enough. One dusk, As the sky turned to copper and the wind fell quiet, Alex sat beside the fire with the blue-scaled juvenile curled near her hip. She whispered a story, not a scientific one, but a memory. She told it to the lizard as if it could understand. Perhaps it did. Perhaps understanding wasn't the point. The lizard clicked softly. She leaned back against the smooth ridge behind her, eyes half closed, mind quiet for the first time in weeks. The sky above shimmered with stars. There was no end to the research, no final discovery, only rhythm, only breath, only presence. And in that silence, the girl who had come to tame a monster had instead found an ancient truth waiting in scales and sparks, that some beings are never meant to be claimed, only met.